Hey up, Bonfire Night is just round the corner, and I thought it might be appropriate to do a video on the star of the show, Yorkshireman Guy Fawkes. So, like most people in England, I grew up celebrating Bonfire Night, or Guy Fawkes Night as it's also known, learning about it in school, collecting a penny for the guy, and all that good stuff that goes along with it. But it wasn't until much later that I learnt that the well-known plotter was born and raised in Yorkshire, and ever since then I've been interested in the Yorkshire connections to the famous Gunpowder Plot event. I'm well aware that the rights and wrongs of Guy's actions are still hotly debated, so I'm going to keep the content as factual and Yorkshire themed as possible. I am going to reference things like the Church of England, Catholic recusants throughout, but I'll leave it to someone more qualified than me to go into the actual detail on how that all fits into the historical context of the period. So, Guy Fawkes was born around the Stonegut area of York in 1570, the second of 4 children. There are a couple of places that claim to be where he was born, but the most well known is the building that's now known as the Guy Fawkes Inn on High Petergate. He seems to have been from a good family. His dad was a legal professional that worked for or with York Minster, which was just over the road from where Guy might have been born. And one of his great-grandfathers was a wealthy merchant who at one time had been the Lord Mayor of the city. Guy was raised in the Church of England, as was the law at the time, and he was baptised at St Michael the Belfry Church, which is a lovely church, still standing, and once again, that's just right next to the Minster and right over the road from the Guy Fawkes Inn. Guy's biological dad sadly passed away when Guy was only 8 years old, and a few years later his mum remarried, this time to a merchant, Dennis Bainbridge, who was a recusant or secret Catholic from Scotton, which is a village near Harrogate in North Yorkshire. How and exactly when Guy became a devout Catholic is up for debate, and I think it's been debated for hundreds of years, but on top of the influence of his stepdad Dennis Bainbridge, it's thought that there was a Catholic streak on his mum's side, and Guy also had a cousin who risked his life to become a Jesuit priest, and he was also from York. Another big influence on Guy is thought to have been his headmaster at St Peter's School in York. So St Peter's is a school that's still running to this day. It's a well-known and very ancient school in the city. And at the time Guy was a pupil, the headmaster John Pullane, whose family was from Blubberhouses in North Yorkshire, was another Yorkshire recusant, another secret Catholic, whose views may have rubbed off on his pupils. It's also interesting to note that 2 other pupils from St Peter's went on to be involved in the Gunpowder Plot, and those were John and Christopher Wright, who were originally from East Yorkshire. After school, Guy seemingly made money off his deceased father's estate in York, renting land out and selling a parcel of land in the Clifton area of York, on the outskirts of York, when he was in his early 20s. And it was partly funded by this that he set sail to Flanders around 1593, which at the time Flanders was controlled by Catholic Spain, and this accelerated the chain of events that for Guy and co-conspirators like John and Christopher Wright would culminate in the failed attempt to kill King James I and the failed attempt to blow up Parliament, which of course resulted in the grisly deaths of Guy and his co-conspirators. Bonfire Night is still celebrated in England and some other countries around the Commonwealth and some other parts of the UK, and Guy has become very well known thanks to his depiction in all sorts of media. And in terms of the lasting legacy in Yorkshire, there are still plenty of traces of the past to be found. As mentioned earlier, the Guy Fawkes Inn on High Petergate claims to be where he was born, and that's still open and can be visited to this day. And there's also a Guy Fawkes Arms pub in the village of Scotton, which was, as I mentioned earlier, where his stepdad Dennis Bainbridge was from, and it's somewhere that Guy would have undoubtedly spent time as a young man. St Peter's School in York, as I mentioned, is still open, still very popular and doing very well. And the school remembers Guy as a notable alumni, and they have a tradition of not burning an effigy of him on Bonfire Night because they consider it to be poor form to burn a former pupil. There's also an interesting case of the Fawkes family of Farnley Hall near Otley. Farnley Hall is a lovely old stately home in that part of the world. The resident family changed their surname to Fawkes in the late 1700s, but they do claim to be related to Guy, but it's something that I've not been able to find a huge amount of information about online. Overall, I think as I was looking into this, it's amazing how deep Guy's Yorkshire roots go, whether that be directly to York or nearby towns through his extended family. and I appreciate that I've only scratched the surface with this video today. So do spare a thought for Guy's Yorkshire roots whenever Bonfire Night comes round. In true Yorkshire Words of Wisdom style, I've also found a couple of dialect poems about Guy Fawkes, this time from a collection by famous Yorkshire dialect poet F.W. Moorman, as found in the book Yorkshire Dialect Poems. The collection was published in the early 1900s, but these ones are taken from the traditional poems part of the book, which makes me think that they might be significantly older. The poems don't have a writer attributed to them, or a year, and within the book itself they are right next to each other. It's almost not even clear that they are two separate poems. So what I'll do is I'll read them out one after the other, and without further ado, here are the Guy Fawkes Day poems as featured in F.W. Moorman's Yorkshire Dialect Poems. A stick and a stake, for King James's sake, please gi'es a coil, a coil. Awd Grimey sits upon yon hill, as black as any old crow. He's gotten his long grey coit, wi' buttons down afoor. He's gotten his long grey coit, wi' buttons down afoor.